over on the Purple Druid Presents Wargaming Culture YouTube channel. Uh, he's been discussing sieges in miniature wargaming and also simple ways to do sieges as well as uh, procedures for sieges that would fit in with his Hex Trail board game for campaign war games. That's something he's been putting together for a while now. It's definitely worth checking out. You should definitely check out his channel. He also has a Substack and his videos on where he has talked about sieges, or a string of videos that he had where he basically performed a siege that came out of his role playing game campaign that he runs. I've made a list of those videos, and there will be a link in the description below. But what I want to explore, and what he's explored a lot mainly, is the assault part of the siege, where the army attacks the fortified position, whether it's a city or a castle, and how to work that out to have it overcome in a way that doesn't take a very long time. And he's also been looking at abstract methods that fit in with that board game, where you're just rolling some dice, but where you have meaningful input, meaningful decisions to make, so that it's not just simply do this, do this, do this, and here's the result. But what I want to look at is the other type of siege, at least in this video. I am going to look at the assault style as well, but in this video I want to look at the waited out siege, where a besieging army surrounds a castle, and because they don't have the right equipment, or because they don't feel like they have the sufficient numbers to simply overwhelm the defenders through the defenses, they basically are isolating that fortification and trying to wait them out. So in order to do that, I mainly wanted to simulate, well, not simulate, but to try to factor in two things: supplies of food and water, and the spread of disease. Because up until really modern times, going back to ancient times, medieval times, even Napoleonic era, the American Civil War era, armies suffered as many, if not more, casualties from disease as they did from actual combat. So what I have set up here is the besieging army. You see that each of these is set at 5. So this is 25 units in the besieging army, and there are 5 units in the army that's being besieged. And this dice and these dice are going to represent their supplies, and these kind of dice are going to represent the spread of disease. And the way this is going to work is, for each unit, so 5 units for here, 25 for here, I will roll a die each turn, which I've decided just arbitrarily basically represents about a week. If your total of that you roll on the dice is equal to the total you have on the units, you have adequate food supply, and everything's fine. But if you roll any ones, those dice get removed from that pool for the next time when they're rolled. Now, the defenders, because they're in a castle, and because this is designed to help withstand sieges, they have 5 extra dice available to them. So as a dice is removed, they can replace it, up until they've lost 5 dice. So this is sort of a die combination of a dice pool and the usage dice that is used in some role-playing games, where for something like arrows or torches or other expendables, rations included, you would have a die of a different size. Maybe it's a D12 if you have a lot, maybe it's a D6 if you don't have that many. And you'd roll those dice every time you had to dig into that expendable resource. And if it came up a 1, you'd go down to the next size die until you get to the D4, and then when you rolled a 1, you were out. But since I'm trying to keep this more in line with the Hex Trail board game he's been running, where he's been doing a lot of stuff with just basic D6 dice, and because it's the type of dice that is used in a lot of war games and a lot of people are familiar with, I just wanted to go with D6s. So that's the supplies. And when you start running out of supplies, if you start rolling the numbers below your total of units, those units will become diminished. Now, depending on what type of war game you're running, what type of system you're using, that may mean they drop down a level, or it may mean they're half strength or something like that. I'm not going to worry about what that means here because we're just trying to run sort of the abstract. The other thing is the disease. Each turn, 2 disease dice will be rolled with the supply dice. And if they come up with 1, then one of the units is diseased. And it does the same thing. It just creates a diminished unit. And this will slowly accumulate. When half the units are diminished in some way, you'll start rolling for morale for each unit that is diminished. And that's going to be a simple, it's basically going to be a 50-50 roll. This ties into what I'm considering for the assault system, where units that are at full strength and are in their element, so to speak, get a hit on a 4+, a 4, 5, or 6. And then if they are damaged, if they get injuries that remove some of their effectiveness, they'll drop down. Or if they're put in a situation where they can't play to their strength, like for example, if cavalry have to fight dismounted, they would have a lower ability. But that's not what the diminishment is going to do here. It's just going to be a straight 4, 5, or 6. You succeed your morale. 1, 2, or 3, you fail your morale. Now, this will have different effects because of the situations that the attackers and the defenders in. For the attackers, because they're camped out in the open, if a diminished unit fails its morale, it just leaves. They are going to go look elsewhere. They don't want to be in the army anymore. They don't want to fight anymore. They just want to be gone. They want out of this situation, and they'll have the opportunity, because they're out in the open, that even with guards on the camp, they'll have the opportunity to leave. Now, in the castle, the defenders, they don't really have that opportunity, because the only way to leave also lets the invading army in, and the other units aren't going to let them do that. So what I'm going to do there is, when we get to where all the units are diminished, and when they roll the morale check, if the number of units that fail that morale check is less than or equal to the number of units that succeed the morale check or are not yet diminished, nothing happens. But if the number of units that fail the morale check are superior, then there will be basically a brief battle. They'll roll off, and if the units that failed the morale check win, they'll surrender. If the units that succeed win, then they'll stay, and those diminished units will have been essentially disposed of. They'll be locked up, or they will have been killed in the battle, to whether or not they want to surrender. So that's basically it. So the other thing is, for both sides, if it gets to the point where you have units that are both starving because of lack of supply and units that are also diseased, then those units will die at the beginning of the next turn, to simulate that they've been weakened. So you will be either diminished because you are starving, or you'll be diminished because of disease. And we get to the point where one unit or another one or more units has to be both. Then they're essentially at death's door. And there will come a point where either the army doing the besieging just essentially quits the field and leaves, or where the defenders surrender. So that's basically it. And that was a pretty brief explanation, but I'm going to put that explanation. This explanation is going to be a separate video, and as I do these videos related to siege warfare, I'm going to string them all together and make a list. And again, there will be links, and I'll update the links in each video as we go. But this is just the basic explanation. We're going to roll dice for supplies, and when it's a 1, that die will move out of the supply. But as long as the total rolled equals the number of units remaining, they're fine. Otherwise, they start going into starvation. I'm going to roll dice that when 1s come up, they have they get diseased. Also, one thing I didn't mention was once disease starts, another die will be added. So instead of rolling 2 dice, you'll be rolling 3 dice each turn. But again, ones come up, they'll be diseased. I'll be tracking, and then once they get more than half of the total number of units are diminished because of disease or starvation, you'll start rolling morale checks to see if the attacking army deserts or the defending army surrenders, fights itself, and then surrenders. So that's it. Next video, we're just going to go through the die rolls and see what happens.